Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. And we have a very special guest tonight, Amanda Wyss, whose resume is too long to recite right now. Amanda, how you doing? And thank you for being with us.
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. It is my pleasure. Let's just get started. You have such a successful career that encompasses so many memorable, now classic movies. Your first professional credit is like sometime around the age of 20. Just tell us when did you know that you wanted acting to be your career?
Well, I, my older sister, was doing a play, and I went to see her play, and I was 11, and that's really when I went, oh wow, this is amazing. And so that theater here in Los Angeles, the following year did The Innocents, and I got to play the little girl Flora in that. It's a really good. Beautiful play. And then the following year, I did The Bad Seed, playing Rhoda at
Mm-hmm.
the same theater. And then from there, I got an agent. So I was 12 and started doing commercials. So
Wow.
did a lot of commercials and voiceovers. And then when I when I was still a teenager, actually, I got my first guest star that I'd ever read for because I didn't read for those during while I was in high school. I got Buck Rogers in the 25th century, which was really fun, and I wore like a really bizarre little toga outfit, and then I think all my lines were "I love you, Buck Rogers," and so I was Laura the Wood Nymph.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, I just started doing TV movies and lots of episodics, a ton of pilots that didn't go to TV series,
Mm-hmm.
much to my heartbreak. And then when I was still maybe by 20, I was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High,
And we're
and then
actually going to get to that right now
so
because,
that's kind of the sequence of things. But so I kind of knew from theater, and then after high school, I went to drama school and studied stage,
yeah.
and but then ended up not. I've only done one professional play, which was amazing because it was with Eva Marie Saint. Um, but it
It
all
just goes to show you that, theater school, workshops, it's good. It's a good tool to have, but sometimes it's not necessary. So let's go to what is your first feature film that's not made for TV, movie, or a TV series, and that is Fast Times at Ridgemont High, correct?
actually I forgot one, and it's not a very good movie, but it's called Force Five, and it was directed by oh my gosh, I think I'm forgetting his name, Robert Klaus, who directed Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
So I was super excited. I was still a teenager. It might have been like just the summer after high school, and it it was bad. And another outfit that I basically was in a sheet shaped like a cult thing, like a little robe. I was like, what is it with people dressing me in sheets, whether it be a toga or a cult robe? So I did that one, and then I did Fast Times.
All right. So Fast Times, you got the script, you audition. At the time, did you think this was going to be anything more than just another 80s teen movie that might have its little bit of a heyday, but just over time fade in the background, which it hasn't been, and it's become a classic?
Yeah. I didn't think those things only because I was so young and naive. I think I thought everything was going to be big, but it was also that they were really like when I went and met with Amy Heckerling, who is she's a goddess.
Hmm.
I love her so much. Um, everybody was already talking that it was kind of the new American Graffiti. Plus, it was a huge studio film. It was a big studio film. So, I mean, I thought it had a chance. I mean, ever hopeful. So I kind of, and the script was so good that you kind of just thought, wow. hopefully this won't go wrong because the script is so good.
And the cast, oh my
And
God. I mean, talk about an all-star lineup.
you know what's amazing about that, the cast of that film, is that every single person in it either went on to be a huge star, a character actress like me, or left the business and are hugely successful. So
Yeah.
there's literally every single person in it. It got a bit of blessing from that
I
film.
mean, you're talking about Sean Penn, Phoebe Cates, the list just goes on and on. Now,
Eric's, yeah, it's crazy.
now looking back on it, 40 years later, and the impact it's still having, do people still approach you about Fast Times?
Um, you know, when people, yeah, in some ways, like if I'm at a Comic-Con or something, there's people just love that film, and now it's like the third generation of people watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if just randomly somebody will say, "Oh my God, I heard you were in that movie. I love that movie so much." So yeah, I mean, it's not like people recognize me from it, but it's if when they know I'm in it, people are, I love to hear the stories because people, really loved that film, and it's fun to hear.
Now, looking back, after all this time and reflecting on the role of Lisa that you played at Ridgemont,
Yeah.
what impact do you think that had on your career back then?
Well, I mean, I think it did a little bit in the sense that, I was young and I had really big agents at the time, and uh, that it helped kind of create a little bit of momentum, but mostly that momentum went back into television for me. That's when I started doing a lot of TV pilots and TV movies. And
Mm-hmm.
I think right after that, I did one of the highest rated TV movies ever at the time, anyway, with Lonnie Anderson, called My Mother's Secret Life, and things like that. That I probably that movie had helped,
Yeah.
make.
Now, we're going to get to Nightmare on Elm Street in a second, but I want to jump ahead a little bit. In '85, you played Beth in Better Off Dead. I
Yeah,
love that movie, with John Cusack. Your character played the typical '80s popular high school girl who was dating the popular high school guy, and you were the girl that John Cusack was pining over the whole movie till the very end.
yeah.
Looking back on Better Off Dead, it doesn't quite have the following of like Fast Times at Ridgemont High or even Nightmare on Elm Street, but that was a great movie and it still has a loyal fan base to today. What was your
Yeah.
experience like working on Better Off Dead?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, first I wanted to address a couple things you said. One of the reasons that it doesn't have quite the same. I mean, although the fans of Better Off Dead are huge, it's impossible to see. It
Yeah,
doesn't stream. It's not on demand. Somewhere in the shuffles of studios selling each other,
that's a
it
shame.
got lost in a vault somewhere. So I think that because the impact of like other films from that era, is that they're streaming constantly, and they're just people have more access to it. But the fun thing about doing that movie was in the same like 9 months I did Nightmare on Elm Street at the end of summer. I did Better Off Dead from fall, and then then the next January I left to do Silverado. So it was a pretty big spree. But Better Off Dead, we're all still friends. It was so much fun. All we did was laugh. And we'd go at night and do there was a we were shooting at this resort in Utah, and we were like kind of the only people there. And so there was a place called the Tram Bar. We'd go, we'd have our dinner, we'd dance all night, and then we'd wake up in the morning and just laugh all day. And Curtis Armstrong and John and Aaron Dozier, the three guys, were
Hmm.
so flippin' funny together constantly. Like we were like in tears laughing the entire time, which, by the way, rarely ever happens where you're laughing all the time on a set. It's usually tense and people are fighting. That's not true, but it was so much fun. It was so much fun, and I just loved that movie.
It's such a fun movie. Now, you said Fast Times was a big studio film. What was Better Off Dead the same, or was that a smaller scale?
It was a little bit smaller scale, but it was still a studio film. Uh, so it had a lot of people. It had a lot of people behind it. Um, so yeah, it wasn't a little indie by any
Yeah.
stretch of the imagination, and uh, but it's just gotten lost in the shuffle. In fact, I asked the director, Savage Steve, who I love, and now I can't remember what he told me because it's like
It gets mixed. Yeah, I tell you, with the legal rights, it's a shame in my
yeah,
mind that it is lost in the shuffle, and today's generation doesn't have access to it,
right,
such as other movies. Because
right,
I'm sure if access to it was available as some other '80s films, it
yeah.
would regain a whole new generation of followers.
I think so. At Comic Cons, when people come up, because they tend to come up for Better Off Dead, for Fast Times, Nightmare, and then the Highlander, because I was on that series.
Hmm.
And the people that own Better Off Dead, the DVD of it or whatever, like they've passed it down, like from people my age to their kids, and it's really extraordinary. And people love it, and they're like, my kid's finally old enough to see this movie, and so I love it. I mean, it's just people have such great stories, especially Better Off Dead. Like families seem to watch that
Hmm.
at Christmas time together, and it's kind of neat to know that you're a part of people's celebration.
And you know that the '80s is sort of repeating itself today, especially when it comes to like fashion. The '80s style is back in fashion.
Oh, I
Uh,
know.
it is, in my opinion, uh, a movie like Better Off Dead would be very relevant in today's world about what high schoolers have to deal with. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think Fast Times is still
Mm-hmm.
relevant. I think, yeah, I do. I think Better Off Dead really, in a way, without social media, it was pre cell phones and all that, obviously,
Yeah.
but how hard it is to grow up, how hard it is to be a teen, how hard it is, to find yourself and build your self confidence and all those things when things aren't.
Oh, you froze. You still there? Okay, we lost you there for a second. We got you back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Okay,
no,
Savage Steve Holland is. Yeah,
yes.
I love. He just wrote a great script.
And it was a great script, and I'm going to say it again. It's a shame that that movie is lost somewhere in the vault and it's not being distributed today. Now, looking at your resume, I mean, like you said, in the '80s, it was like one role after the other. You are a really hot commodity. Being so young, uh, did that put you in, I'm trying to find the right word, give you a false sense of security, maybe that it's always going to be that way? Not that it wasn't. You went on to have a very successful career, but man, in the '80s, it's just one thing after the other for you.
Yeah, I do think that there was a part of me that thought this is great. Like this is this is how it's always going to be, which it wasn't. I've had some really lean years as far as getting the roles I wanted, or I go through a streak where I test for a million things and don't get any of them, and it's always cyclical. But yes, I was a little bit where other friends of mine were struggling and things were just really happening for me. I thought that not in an arrogant way, but I thought, oh, I've built this and it will sustain itself. But
Yeah,
um, the business is mercurial and it
yeah,
doesn't always work out that way.
exactly, exactly. So you get casted as Tina on Nightmare on Elm Street. Uh, Tell us, how did the role of Tina come your way? Did your agent just, tell you to audition, get you the script? How did it come your way?
Um, yes, I was sent the script by my agent, and all the girls read for the role of Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read the script, and I hadn't really ever seen a horror film or anything. I just, not for any reason other than they just weren't around me. Um, and I'd seen some old black and white ones, but I'd read a lot of horror books.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked reading it. But anyway, so I went and met with Wes Craven, who was lovely, and we talked about horror, novels that we'd both read and stuff. Because the script for Nightmare on Elm Street, I remember telling him, Wes, that I thought it read like a really good horror novel because it was just written so beautifully. He's such a good
Mm-hmm.
storyteller, and um, really understood that age group that he was writing for because he had daughters that
Mm-hmm.
age. And so I read for Nancy, and then I get a call back, and it's for Tina, and I'm like, wait, what? And so I go back in for my callback, and it was Heather, Johnny, Nick, and me. And he had us all just read together and then told us that we had the part in the room, which never happens.
Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard that.
Yeah. So he just kind of knew, like he had gone through the tapes, and I don't know, maybe he watched them with his kids, or I'm not even sure. He just like was really sure about what he was looking for in in the characters. And I think it was also so well done in the sense that um I don't know, he picked really good chemistry. We all got along. It was the same with Better Off Dead, that like
Yeah.
chemistry, because you can, there's often times when you're doing a movie or a TV show and you just don't have chemistry, and you're like, that's when your acting school comes in handy, where you can manufacture it. But yeah, so he just told us we all got the part, and I was really excited. I didn't really know much about horror, and I remember telling Wes, I was like, I don't know, like, is it different if to do a horror movie? And he's like, no, don't.
No.
Yeah, I just want you to be, do the things, because he had seen me in a couple TV movies. And he was like, just do what you do, and I'll do the scary stuff. I'm like, okay.
Now,
So
now Wes Craven, by the time Nightmare, he was pretty established, starting from the 70s. Did you know about Wes Craven when you were going into Nightmare on Elm Street and some of his prior projects?
no, I didn't, because I had never really seen modern horror movies
Mm-hmm.
before. So I didn't know anything about him, honestly. Or anyone in the current horror or the modern horror world. I mean, I knew old, like Vincent, like Bela Lugosi movies and Vincent Price and stuff like that. Um, so I got to just have a relationship with Wes, just fresh, just as an actor and a director, because I was just excited. He was so kind and funny,
And
and
maybe that helped. I bet you that kind of helped, and the intimidation factor wasn't there for you.
it wasn't at all, because I was just like, we're making a horror. I don't know, like I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't afraid, and I knew as soon as I was done with that, I'd already been cast in Better Off Dead, so. I was also kind of half thinking about, like, oh my gosh, I need to finish this, and then I have like a week to get to Utah. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
was like, right. So
Now, a lot of people have forgotten that Johnny Depp was in A Nightmare on Elm Street. That's just one of,
wow. No.
yeah, new actor. Is it true, uh, like you and Heather became friends on the set and remained friends for a while after?
We're still great friends. She's one
Awesome.
of my closest friends, and has been since we made the movie. Um, yeah, and we're all still friendly. Obviously, Johnny isn't here a lot of the
Hmm.
time, and Nick has, or now he goes by Jesus, has gone on to, he's more of like a director now,
Hmm.
and doing all kinds of things. And but yeah, we all really like each other. But Heather and I have stayed. We're In fact, I'm seeing her on Tuesday.
I mean, looking back on all the films you did back then and all the great actors, including yourself, that they got to work with you and you got to work with them, you're like, wow, look at these people and what they did afterwards, and the honor and the pleasure that I had working with them. Do you ever think that, like, like, look at all these people that I had a chance to work with when they were getting started?
Oh my gosh, even now, yeah, there's like a couple. I mean, just so many big standouts, especially like I got to do a TV movie with Robert Mitchum, and I was so intimidated and scared, and he was the nicest person to me. And, Eva Marie Saint. I mean, I just like sat there and was like, tell me everything about Marlon Brando. Tell me everything about yourself. I want to know every story from On the Waterfront. And, um, oh my God, there's so many. I, I always count my lucky stars
Yeah.
and feel really grateful that my hat is still in this game and that I still occasionally get a role that I love, um, and that I get to work with talented creators. And but yeah, always and yeah, there's just so many people that it's just and I got to meet like some of my like teen idols. Like I got to um, work with Sean Cassidy,
Wow.
and I got to
God,
meet
that's a
Don
blast from the
Boston.
past, huh?
So I was like, so when I was younger, I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. I cannot believe I am here with Sean Cassidy.
So here you guys, you, Heather, Johnny, the rest of the night. When do you recall was the first time you met Robert? Robert England.
The first time I met him was in the makeup trailer, and he would get there so much earlier than the rest of us because his makeup application took, I think,
Oh,
5 hours every day.
I can
He was
imagine.
such a trooper. But I had seen him in things like
V.
but also he was in one of my all-time favorite movies called Big Wednesday about these surfers in the 70s, um, and V, oh my God, he was in so many great films, and he also has a love for the theater. But so I walked into the makeup trailer and he was sort of half made up, and he's like, "Ah, Robert," because he's very chatty, and he's a great raconteur and always has a story on hand to tell. And I think we all kind of hung out in the makeup trailer watching him get his makeup done. We didn't wear very much makeup. We were, kids, and they
Yeah.
threw powder on us and some like Carmex on our lips and like called it a day. So we would just hang out with him in the makeup trailer and he listened to his stories. He had so many great stories.
Now, I'm really curious. How long did shooting Nightmare take from principal photography to the end?
I think it was only like 6 weeks. It was a very
Wow.
brief shoot, and it was so low budget. I mean, I there there was a couple times where the plug almost got pulled before we were even done. Um, there were days when the, Heather, Johnny, and I all wore the same size Levi's, and there were some days where there just was only two pair, and so like thank God they did. Like it was very low budget, and so it was a really fast shoot, and I was only there for maybe 3 weeks of the
Hmm.
shoot, and so I was there obviously, and then I left, and then I came back the very last day to, have
Yeah.
have a toast with everybody because it we,
Big
it's
rap party.
yeah, and it was also like it was a really fun adventure, and it was exciting, and I wanted to be there the last day to commemorate it
Yeah.
because it was fun and exciting, and because I bet you're going to ask this. I did not know it was going to be a classic or a success or anything. I think partly because I didn't know the horror world, so I didn't have anything to base it on. And
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. When you read the script, you got the part. Was there any part of you that thought, man, doing a horror movie might have a negative impact on my career?
I did it against my agent's wishes. Everybody
Wow.
that represented me, the entire team, was against me doing the movie.
Well, I'm
Just
glad you didn't listen to them.
I did not listen to them, and it was partly because of my meeting with Wes. I just really liked him, and I just thought I wanted to learn from him, and I wanted to be around him, and I thought he was such a great storyteller. I wanted to get to help tell that story in my own way,
Yeah.
completely.
And that just sheds a light on back, in the 80s on what the industry really thought about horror
Yeah,
and how, agents, managers, publicists were trying to protect their clients from what they thought was taking a wrong turn in their career.
I agree.
Do you
I
feel, looking at today and where horror stands today and how it's withstood the test of time, that has done a complete 180?
Well, I do. I mean, now it's like major, like, you know, all the any good role that I would want to play in a horror film is now being played by like a triple A list movie star.
Yeah.
So you go, oh, okay. So everybody just knows where the money is now. I don't know that they have a love for it, but they certainly know it's a lucrative thing to be in that keeps it. I think it keeps actors relevant, and studios are making a ton of money off of everybody,
Yeah.
off the work of all the horror people up
It's
until now.
it's one of the top genres right now. I believe it's at its height. Now, Tina, your character on Nightmare on Elm Street, uh, I believe is Freddy Krueger's first on-screen kill. Did you know that?
Do you want to know? I did not even ever put that together till I was at a Comic Con, and somebody's like, "What's it like being Freddy's first victim?" And I was, oh, I guess I am. Well,
Yeah.
well, the best went first.
I mean, we all know how this franchise has become, to call it a hit would be an understatement. It's become a classic would be an understatement. Looking back, how does it feel to have that distinction, being Freddy Krueger's first on screen victim?
Well, I don't really think about it like that, really, but I do think about how lucky and blessed I am that I got to be a part of such an iconic story that people love so much. And um, that somebody was saying about the first victim, Freddie's first victim, and I was like, well, technically, I'm the first person to fight Freddie.
Hmm.
And the thing that Tina did, that she literally fought him for 14 minutes. And
Yeah.
that's got to be the longest fight scene ever in a movie. And but it was neat. Like, there's cool things have happened. Like, there was a picture of Wes and I hanging, of Wes and me hanging in the Directors Guild in Los Angeles in the lobby. This huge thing of us for years. It was amazing, and that's just amazing. And then the other thing was, Robert told me that he was at the, not the Venice, maybe it was the Venice Film Festival. It was some big film festival, and there was a huge poster of me in the body bag.
Yeah.
Like, it was like 3 stories tall, just randomly there. Like, the movie wasn't. And Robert was like, guess where you were? And sent me a picture. I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I finally made it to the Venice Film Festival.
So filming is done. Now it comes time for the release. What were your emotions when this thing was about to hit the theaters? I
I
mean,
was excited for it. Like, I couldn't wait to see it. And this is a true story, and it's funny. Is that I was late to the cast and crew screening, and the fire marshal wouldn't let me in because it was too crowded. And I'm like, but I'm in and he's like, sorry, you can't come in.
oh
And
man.
then I went to Westwood to see it opening weekend, and it was sold out. And then I went the next night, and it was sold out. And I finally went, screw it, I'm never going to see this movie on the thing. And so I didn't see it until Wes gave me a VHS copy of
Oh
it.
my God.
And then,
That's a shame you didn't get to see it for the first time in a theater. Now, at which point did you realize that this thing was on a trajectory that nobody guessed?
it was about a year or so after it went out on VHS. Um, there were things. Sorry, there's like appears to be a dog fight outside my window. Um, the uh, I know this is when I knew I was at my mom's house in Manhattan Beach, handing out Halloween candy. And there, every third kid was a Freddy Krueger. And I was like, what? And so when some kids, teenagers came to the door and they were dressed like Freddy Krueger, I was like, I'm in that movie. And they were like, no, you're not. It's like, oh. I was like, no, I play Tina. And they're like, no, you don't. No, they didn't believe me. And I was like, but
Oh,
that's when I knew, when I felt like that was like when you saw so many kids and teens dressed like Freddy Krueger. I mean, I went, oh, this is like an iconic monster
yeah.
that,
I mean, in '84, you already had Michael Myers, and then of course Jason and Freddy joined those two, which was, a thing. And still today, it's Freddy, Jason, and Michael, the three
right.
biggest slashers of all time. Now that body bag scene, I mean, your death scene, a nightmare, and that body bag scene. How much time? Tell us how the filming sequence went of you being in that body bag. And how did it make you feel personally? I hope you're
And
not claustrophobic.
I'm totally claustrophobic. Um, it was, it was really terrifying. I mean, but in the respect that we're making a movie, not terrifying like I'm doing something heroic or something. But um, it was a low budget, so it was a real body bag. So there was no like inside zipper or anything. And they just like poked a few pinholes in it. And then Wes would be like, hold your breath. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, who's going to let me out of this if I panic? And
I
they were like,
know.
oh, there's, whatever, George in the corner, or he'll, just yell, he'll come get you. So I felt really trapped, and it was very difficult to breathe through little pinholes in a really thick plastic body bag.
Uh,
So I just wanted it over. But Wes had made a joke, like when I would walk on set, he'd be like, guess what I'm making you do today? Because there would be days some of the things didn't even end up in the final cut, but I had to pick up a handful of worms, or I had to, go in the body bag, or I had to stand in eels.
oh,
I had to like get a plastic cast on my face so they could do the centipede thing. And so there was a lot of things. So he was like, and today's the body bag. So, and then they like spray you down with sticky blood and all kind of, oil to make it it was just so like, ew.
oh my God, I can
Yeah.
imagine. Now your death scene on Elm Street with the whole rotating room and that whole contraption. Uh, what was that like?
Well, it was very disorienting, and halfway through, I no longer could tell which way was up or down. I got, you know, vertigo, I guess, to some degree. And because everything in that room was like nailed down and glued. So it was like a box built in a sound stage, and literally like people were outside
Mm-hmm.
cranking it to go around. Um, so I was always on the ground, but there would be times I'd look up and there was the bed above me, and then I just thought I was falling, and I actually panicked and started screaming at some one point, and they had to cut. And Wes came in and stuck his head through the window, and he's like, "See, you're on the ground. I'm standing." And so he started to talk to me, and then he went, and I'd already been in the room for like a half hour while it was going around, and he all of a sudden stopped and went, "Oh my God, this is awful. I'm so disoriented. I can't believe I'm doing this to this girl." So like he goes back out, and we practiced it a lot because it was low budget. There was only one room. We're putting this staining blood stuff. I mean, I think that there's better blood now than there was back then. So we couldn't really make any mistakes. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had to make it look like I was being dragged, and we really worked on my athletic ability to make that happen, and and how to fall into each corner, and because once we got blood on the walls, we kind of had to just keep going, and
Keep going.
so it was a lot of pressure for me because I was just like, all right, this is where all my training comes in. We've rehearsed it. I know it was like choreographing a dance routine, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did it, and um, when we were done, I felt like we'd made something really cool. Like when I got out of the room and was able to get my bearings again, like I just went, and the crew, everybody was really silent.
Hmm.
Just like when people go, "Oh, that was eerie or terrifying or something." So I felt really proud of the work that Wes helped me do.
Yeah, and that's my next question. Considering how low budget Nightmare on Elm Street was, were you impressed with Wes's innovation to come up with something like that?
Very much so. And he was like that with everything. I think, and in all of his films, although I obviously went on to do bigger budgeted
Yeah.
films after that, I think partly he's so smart. I mean, he was a professor and a writer, and he's so smart and well spoken that I just think he was so smart. His ability to problem solve and create um, was, unparalleled in many ways. And so, yeah, I think it was impressive. And then also, with Bob Shea was such a, we're going to get this done. We're going to make this happen. And, trying to sell, they were like selling it out of the trunk of his car because it's what made New Line, but New Line Cinema wasn't,
Yeah.
could have been, Bob's basement. You know what I mean? Like, it turned into, they call it the house that Freddie built
Yeah.
because
Now you've had a chance to work with so many great directors. When it comes to innovation, where would you put like Wes Craven in that list? Was he, very innovative compared to others? Was he on top of the list?
I'd say he's definitely way up there, like with maybe like Lawrence Kasdan and those other like really brilliant writer directors that have created such classic films. I mean, I'm drawing a blank on directors' names, but I would say Wes should and does, I'm sure, live in the top 10 of those kind of just innovative.
Yeah.
The thing that he did interesting, in my opinion, also with Nightmare on Elm Street is I actually, someone from, I was on, I don't know where, I think I was at a Comic Con and I was kind of listening to somebody's panel and I think it was somebody from Blumhouse said that all great horror is intrinsically sad.
That makes
And
sense.
that's a great horror. Like you can make any kind of horror movie you want. And Wes Wes is really, when you break Nightmare on Elm Street down, it's about latchkey kids.
Hmm.
It's we filmed that was like the first generation that of divorce in the US, because people didn't used to get divorced in mass, and so he was really making a commentary on that. This isn't my opinion, he actually said those things.
Hmm.
So it was like his commentary on, and I believe he was going through a divorce or had just gone through a divorce, of like how that harms children, and and their how children could be so afraid. It's almost like a metaphor or something. So I think that also Nightmare on Elm Street is very sad, really. Like when
It
you watch
is.
it, it's just sad. It's sad. All these kids are like lost and all they have is each other and nobody
And
believes
they're
them.
dying for the sins of their parents.
Yes. Yeah.
That is very sad. Now, the same year you did the movie, you did some video shorts with, Freddy Krueger. How did that come about?
Wait, what video shorts? Wait.
Well, they're listed here. In fact, I've never heard of them until I started researching this.
Oh,
Nightmare on Elm Street alternate endings, happy ending and Freddy ending.
oh, those are okay. That was because I was like, wait a minute, what did I do? Um, those were shot when we were filming Nightmare on Elm Street. Wes shot 3 or 4 different endings,
Okay.
and he and I think Robert has told me this. I believe Wes and Bob Shea didn't agree on the ending, and now I can't remember who wanted what, and I'm not sure that's the. I can't remember if maybe Wes won out, and that is the ending he wanted, but one of them didn't want the ending that was
In the
ultimate,
movie, yeah.
because there was one like where um I can't even remember what they are, but they're alternate endings. And
Okay.
yeah, and so and I remember when we were filming them that also we didn't know which one they were going to pick. So it was kind of fun. So we couldn't, even if we wanted to, we couldn't give away the ending of the movie because we
You
didn't
didn't
know what
know.
to pick.
Now, after doing A Nightmare on Elm Street, did your view on horror change and you decided to do more horror? You have a very nice spectrum of roles. You have done a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Did Nightmare on Elm Street change your view on doing horror going forward?
Yeah, and you want to know, I've literally never been offered another great role like that in a horror film. I've done um I, like two until the id came along, which I loved that movie so much, but I'd done some, things that came along. I did some for money, I did some because I needed to get my health insurance and I needed to do those movies, but they weren't great experiences, and they didn't they weren't of that level. And I would love to do some of the great horror TV series and movies that are being made now, but nobody has ever offered me, I mean, since Nightmare on Elm Street, a plus
Yeah.
role like that. So I don't know if people just don't, what, I don't know the reason behind that, but I would totally love to do another really great horror film, get rid of the bad taste of the couple really bad films that I did. But in 2015, I think it was, I did a movie called The Id, which was
Yes.
another low budget movie, but it was just such a great role and a good, you know, another horror film that was intrinsically sad, and it was a commentary on caretakers and how hard it is, adults taking care of their parents when they're ailing and stuff. And it was really good. And but that's it. Those are the two
Hmm.
that have ever come my way that I would love to do. Like, I mean, I would.
Now, personally, when you're as a fan watching entertainment, do you, every so often watch a horror movie, or are you just not into the genre as a fan?
I'm not as into it as a fan, and not because I don't appreciate it. And I love the idea of it. I literally feel like I'm gonna die because I don't know how to just go, I'm watching a movie. Like I get so scared that I'm too scared. And that if I was ever gonna make a short film, or because I don't know like how to make it's not enough of a story for a film, but of how, like, I would, about somebody just dying because they're so scared watching a horror film.
Yeah.
That's what happens to me when I watch them, where like Heather and Robert are like, oh man, look at how they did that. Oh, that looks cool. Well, literally, okay, true story. I went to the screening of a horror film that Heather Langenkamp did
Hmm.
called Home. I went with her. I was her date. And I inappropriately screamed throughout the whole film to where people wanted me to leave the theater, because literally someone would just reach for a coffee cup and I'd scream. And Heather was like, there's nothing happening. And I'm like, how do you know it's not? And then I would also be ruining the jump scare that was about to happen because I've screamed over somebody like,
Grabbing coffee.
off their sweater. Just like everything scares me. So I'm horrible to go to a horror movie with. And because I have seen a few, I saw the remake of Friday the 13th with Heather. She always drags me. And I screamed so much that somebody asked me to move. And so I'm terrible. I'm just too scared. I'm gonna have a heart attack watching them.
Oh my God, that's a funny, funny story. Would you?
I literally scream so inappropriately at all the like, where people are like, and then people jump because they think something happened, and then they're like, she was just getting a coffee cup. And
What is from doing Nightmare and doing a horror movie? Was there any takeaways that you got from shooting a horror film that you brought forward into some of your other characters?
well, there's a couple things. I learned a couple, it's not tricks, but things that help tell a scary story. Like, if 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 you're being like, if you're the woman that's being followed,
Mm-hmm.
you you or oh no, here's is better. Like, say, like in Nightmare on Elm Street, like if I was on a catwalk and Freddy was down here, never look down, because then the audience is like, look down, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or if the scary thing is above you, you have to find an organic reason never to look up, or you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean, so that the audience, because it
To
builds
make
help.
it realistic.
Yeah, or like if somebody's following you, you turn, but maybe don't turn all the way because you're too afraid to turn around. So you just find ways to make it seem real and organic, and that helps build tension. So I learned that from Wes.
That's
Um,
awesome. Now,
but I was going to say, but what it just it reinforced in me as an actor, like, to just try to be as truthful as possible, because I think the raw truth in, say, a Nightmare on Elm Street, or in the id, which is what, like, kind of more my modern version of
hmm
almost like Tina, um is like that the more just you like unzip your own skin and kind of step into that world and help tell that story, the more emotion the audience will feel, or the more
yeah.
connected to you in the story the audience will feel. So I feel like doing a horror film that young, that was so good, that it really reinforced that, just being that honest as the character, because none of us were like, it was obviously like, we weren't like the hot babe booby girl, you know what I mean? Like, we were like, we look like we could have been, I mean, I was cute, Heather's beautiful, but we were approachable beauties. So I feel like that also helped, like, people feel connected, because you aren't watching like two supermodels, fight a monster.
So it definitely added another dimension to your acting, doing the
I
horror.
I think so.
I
Definitely.
agree. I completely agree. Now, talking about the Id, it's a psychological thriller. Your performance received a lot of praise for the Id, some calling it a career defining performance. Quote, um, how do those words affect you?
Feeling a little teary, I gotta say. I just loved that role so much, and it was just such an honor to be gifted with it, and I kind of thought of her as like, if like a damaged Tina had grown up. They just had that same vulnerability. Both were fighters.
Mm-hmm.
But that movie, I mean, I really gave that my all. And it was directed by the lovely Tommy Hudson, who I also have recorded some of his audiobooks. Like, he's my my writer director in Shining Armor. But that just makes me, it's pretty amazing to be appreciated for
Well,
something that you did, and it doesn't always happen. So I feel super grateful. I just feel so grateful.
here's how I see it. Your performance in the Id was so, in your subtle expressions, your demeanor, it feels like a culmination of a lifetime of acting experience. And like you said, you laid it all out there. And that's what led to such a beautiful performance. I,
That's the nicest thing to say.
I didn't mean to
You're
make you
so,
cry. I don't want to make
you're
people
so.
cry.
Oh my God, I'm like crying like it's a Barbara Walters interview. Thank you for that. That
No,
means a lot to me. And
I mean it. It's just, when it comes to acting, I'm not an actor, obviously, so I don't know much about it. But I feel when you're watching someone in a role and you completely forget that it's a movie that you're watching, where the actor is not acting, that's what you brought with the id, and that's what makes it so great, and that's what makes your performance so great. Now, in with the id, uh, where does that sit in your heart? The movie itself, the performance, the overall experience.
it's up there. It's in my top 5 experiences, and it was not an easy experience. It was very low budget. It was a grueling shoot. We had an amazing crew. Um, And, I just had to go to this place every day. And thank goodness we were on location, so I didn't have to come home
Yeah.
and be like, try to be normal because I definitely did not feel normal while we were filming that. So I got to just go to my hotel room and be weird. But the thing that I realized afterwards, it was about a month after we were filming, we would wrap, and my boyfriend at the time said, I think you need to let her go.
Ooh.
And I realized that I still felt so heavy. And so I had like a little, it sounds so silly, but I had like a little ritual to like, just like let her go. Cause I don't know if I didn't want to let her go or
You
if
get
it was,
attached. You get
yeah, I
attached.
got
Yeah.
attached to her. And, but yeah, Steven was like, you gotta let her go. It's a little heavy. It's a little heavy around here.
Now, I gotta ask you this. Is there anything that you look for now in a script on whether you're even gonna decide to audition for it or not?
Yes. I mean, okay, it depends on when you ask me. If if I haven't worked in a while, my bar is a lot lower than when I'm feeling flush. But obviously, I like strong women. But I mean, even Meredith in the id. I mean, she was super vulnerable and fragile and all those things, but there was something about it was just such a strong character, and so I look for something that I would love, something that tells a good story, maybe has a nice moral, or it doesn't have to be nice, like, but it would just be nice if there was that especially like horror scripts when I've gotten them. And by the way, I don't ever get offered the ones that I want to do. I'm sorry, I've already said that. I'm just going to keep saying that. Like where they have a great story and like the women are powerful or victorious, or there's a great moral about vanity
Yeah.
or selfishness, or you know what I mean? Like where you go, oh, this is
It makes
this
a
is
statement. It makes a statement about, yeah, current relevant events.
yeah, like things like that, and also like you know if the script makes sense, it can be a good movie. But I
Yeah.
have been sent scripts that are just it doesn't make sense, and I think sometimes young filmmakers or inexperienced filmmakers think that they can somehow make a good movie from that. But if it's not on the page, it is not going to be on the screen. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
it has to be in the script. And but really, like I just want to tell good stories, and I don't care what genre they're in, and I want to play characters that I get to be challenged by as an actress,
Hmm.
but also maybe help someone feel
Yeah.
something like the id. So many people reached out to me after they saw it and talked about how they'd been taking care of an ailing parent, and how that even in this weird horror film we helped capture some of the strain they felt.
Hmm.
And so like you know what I mean, so it can be any genre and anything. I just would like to tell good stories, and just help tell good stories.
That makes perfect sense. We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you this. Back in the 80s, when streaming, the internet, all these streaming services were not around, every film was pretty much a studio film, and independent films were not as relevant as they are today. If you wanted to make a film, you don't have the resources that you have today, and that
Yeah.
leads me to my question. Are you a supporter and a fan of independent films, as a where you want to help them out in any way you can?
Yeah. Yes, 100%. Because I think the more voices telling stories, the better. And I think, there's so many opportunities for people, now, if they have a great script, they're able to actually make it themselves if
Yeah,
I mean, there's just so many great stories of that. Yes, I'm 100% supporter of
that's
independent
awesome.
film, and I'm a fan of independent films and independent filmmakers. I just kind of like that kind of I don't know. It just I got to do like what it came out at the beginning of quarantine. I did a Western year before last that was a little indie that turned out was like in the top 10 on Netflix for
Yeah.
like a month. And he Justin Lee, who wrote and directed that, is making really cool indie films. I've done two of his, and I'm super grateful that I get to work with creators like that like can make things like and being innovative with no money and getting really good actors together. And I just, you go, wow, this is cool. I'm so excited to be a part of that.
I know I said that was my last question, but I actually have one more. Are you still doing conventions and appearances and whatnot, or has that stopped?
I haven't done any since 2019.
Well, because of, yeah,
But
COVID, obviously.
yeah, and I know that a lot of people have been going to them. I haven't, but I'm hoping to go maybe next year because feel, I really like meeting people
The
and I like
fan,
hearing,
yeah, interacting with your fans.
yeah, and I love hearing everybody's stories and I it always just makes you feel. I feel it just reminds me again how grateful I am, and it's so I'm hoping I get to go next year a couple times.
Absolutely. And I would love, I go to a lot of cons and cover them, and hopefully one day I'll get to meet you there because you're an absolutely amazing person. This has been an amazing hour. It just flew by. Thank you so much for coming on our show. Uh, I grew up watching you on the screen, and Better Off Dead, and Nightmare on Elm Street, and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. In '84 I was 10, in '82 I was 8. I mean, so I literally grew up watching you on the screen. And if you would have told me back then that 30 plus years later I'd be talking to you, I'd be like, you must be high. And I got to talk to you. And it's been an absolute honor. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts you want to share?
Well, first of all, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I too hope we get to meet in person maybe next
Absolutely.
year. And
Yeah.
you just made me blush, and you're lovely, and just I just hope everybody stays well, and um, everybody that's listening, I hope that everybody's finding their way through this crazy time
Mm.
with their themselves intact and moving forward, hopefully to something exciting. I really wish everyone lots of love and good fortune going forward because I think we all need it right now.
Yeah, we're living in a crazy world. I cannot agree with you any more than that. Thank you to Amanda Wyss. Thank you to all our viewers. It's been a great hour. Stay safe. And until next time, on behalf of Amanda and myself, stay walking. Good night.
Good night.